Hello and welcome to Kent Standard News. I'm MacDiarmid and here are your top stories for Friday the 10th of November. Hindering the homeless, a local look at Suella Braverman's plans to ban tents.
I do have a family of 3 who are actually living in their car at the moment because they lost their job, can't afford to pay the rent.
And Rochester rally. A large crowd of anti-war protesters have blocked a road to a Rochester military site.
I'm out here with Workers for Free Palestine. We're over 400 workers that are picketing this BAE system.
And finally, a hero's tribute, a memorial dedicated to the late cricketer and World War I soldier, Colin Blythe.
For me, it's really important to remember the people that I fought with and have lost in battle.
Now for our first story of the programme. As the Israel and Palestine conflict continues to intensify, people across the world are doing everything they can to slow it down. Here in Rochester, the BAE Systems headquarters have been completely blocked by protesters. Nafisa Raji has this report.
Unshaken by the rain, dozens gather outside Rochester's BAE warehouse, calling for an end to the conflict in Palestine.
So I'm here because I'm really horrified by what's happening in Gaza, Israel's bombing of Gaza, and the problem is that Britain is complicit in what's going on as well. So in factories like the one we're outside of here today is actually helping manufacture the military technology that's being used to kill people in Gaza at the moment. And so this is so close to where we live, and we have a special duty to try and stand against what's going on in Gaza and do anything we can to stop it. I think the British government is totally out of touch with what people in Britain actually want. The vast majority of people want a ceasefire, which I think is the bare minimum. So we hope that these kinds of actions will help put pressure on the government to actually finally take some action and do the right thing, which is to stand for Palestinian justice and to stop the killing of Palestinians.
The message here is clear: an immediate ceasefire.
I think we'll make it a likely option. I think the pressure is mounting, and we know we're not going to stop. This is the second time Workers for Free Palestine come and picket an arms factory, and we're going to keep coming back until a ceasefire is demanded. Many people, including organizations like the United Nations and the World Health Organizations, are explaining that this is actually the worst humanitarian disaster they've seen in a very long time, and we have a moral responsibility to make sure that as people of consciousness, we're putting pressure on the government to push for a ceasefire now.
As many more protests are set to take place in the coming days and numbers intensifying, the growing sentiment echoed by many Britons can certainly be said to be food for thought for world leaders. Nafisa Raji for the Kent Standard.
BAE Systems have released a statement saying they are horrified by the situation in Israel and that they will operate under the tightest regulation and comply fully with all applicable defence export controls, which are subject to ongoing assessment. Next today, Islamophobia has seen a 7-fold increase amid the ongoing crisis in Palestine and Israel. Since the 7th of October, more than 500 Islamophobic incidents were recorded, compared to 73 last year. This is according to Tell Mama, which reports on anti-Muslim attacks. We spoke to Imam Safir Khan, who leads prayers at the local mosque in Gillingham. He says he's been a victim of these hate attacks.
So after the Israel and Palestine issue, turned into a war recently, we were doing a outreach stall in Rochester. There was a woman who came. She said, "This is not correct. We had Islam means peace, and we were there to deliver a message and handing out leaflets." So she said, "No, you're a terrorist. Islam is, terrorism." I said, "No, we believe in peace, and that's why we're here." I guess you get used to it. I think more can be done to stop Islamophobia. I think, again, political leaders need to show a good example, and I don't think that's done always.
That was Imam Safir Khan. Now, while there's been a spike in Islamophobia, this month is also Islamophobia Awareness Month. It's a campaign that started in 2012 and it aims to combat the issue. Our reporter Mahima Abedin spoke to Muslim counsellor Naushaba Khan earlier today.
There's been a rise in Islamophobia, especially since the 7th of October, and it's also Islamophobia Awareness Month. Have you yourself ever been a victim of Islamophobia?
I think it's something that I'm sure every Muslim has somehow experienced at some part in their life. And obviously, there are moments when it's more serious than others. Sometimes it's a passing comment, but I've certainly been aware of it. And I think, particularly when I was growing up at school after September the 11th, that really did heighten opportunities for people to be Islamophobic. And I think we've been on a bit of a journey since then. So a lot of it is based on misinformation or misunderstanding. And it's not how the majority of Muslims live their daily life. We are members of the community, we're doing things, and it shouldn't be something that I think makes you feel like an outsider.
I spoke to a local imam earlier as well, and he says he's been a victim of Islamophobia too, but he also says that politicians have a role to play in shaping people's opinions. Would you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I think politicians need to be leaders in their communities, but also nationally. And I think if we are calling it out, we're speaking up and challenging some of the misconceptions that exist out there. It plays a massive role.
Now, as the number of rough sleepers in Britain's high streets increase, charities in Kent have condemned plans put forward by the Home Secretary, which would restrict the use of tents for the homeless population. Our reporter Oliver Small has this story.
Charities here in Kent have hit out at Suella Braverman's plan to restrict the use of tents for homeless people as the government looks to tackle the rising number of rough sleepers on Britain's high streets. The Home Secretary's plan to restrict charities from giving out tents to homeless people was removed from the King's Speech by Number 10 after heavy opposition. Homeless Charity Shelter has estimated that on a given night in 2022, more than 270,000 people in England will have been recorded as homeless. This comes after the Red Cross warned the government last month that plans to clear a backlog of more than 60,000 historical asylum claims before the end of this year will leave up to 50,000 refugees at risk of being homeless. Charities have warned of a growing homeless crisis caused by a combination of rising rents, a shortage of social and affordable housing, and the cost of living crisis, leaving more people vulnerable to eviction. Here in Kent, Gillingham Street Angels continue to provide support for the homeless population. They have set up cafes, charity shops and allotments throughout the county, aiding the charity's food banks here in Gillingham High Street. Food Bank and Hub Manager Tracy Charlick spoke about the charity's work as well as the comments made by the Home Secretary which characterised rough sleeping as a lifestyle choice.
We think that living in a tent isn't really a lifestyle. It's due to circumstances. Most people that are out on the streets are through no fault of their own. I do have a family of 3 who are actually living in their car at the moment because they lost their job, can't afford to pay the rent. So I don't think anybody in this day and age would choose to live in a tent. We have found that during this climate we are giving food away and help to people who are actually working full times. So anything we can do to help people stretch their money to pay their rent, we do.
As winter approaches, local council and charities here in Kent continue to push the government to provide better support for the vulnerable community here in Kent. Oliver Small, Kent Standard.
I'm now joined by the leader of the Conservative group of Medway, Councillor Adrian Galvin. Thank you for joining me today, Adrian.
Good afternoon, Fitz.
So, how do you feel about Suella Braverman's proposal to limit charities from distributing tents to the homeless?
Giving tents to the homeless is useless. It's like sticking a sticking plaster on a broken leg. It does nothing to solve the problem. Rough sleeping generally is caused by health issues. What we're talking about with rough sleeping is not a housing issue, it's a health issue. The vast majority of rough sleepers have got severe drug, alcohol and mental health issues. Those are the issues you've got to deal with. Giving money to people rough sleeping or giving them a tent will not solve the problem. You've got to deal with those underlying issues. Unfortunately, the government have realised that. They have accepted the recommendation of Baroness Black's report From Harm to Hope, which is a 10-year plan to eliminate rough sleeping. And the issues that are feeding that rough sleeping. Here in Medway, we are very fortunate in that under the previous Conservative administration, we got well over £1 million of funding from the government to deal with this issue. One of the major issues you've got to deal with is providing accommodation.
I do just want to ask you a quick question about
Of
that.
course.
So you were talking about providing accommodation. Recently, Suella Braverman talked about homelessness being a choice. What's your view on that?
I disagree. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a necessity because, unfortunately, most of the providers, the vast majority of providers of supported accommodation who take rough sleepers, will only take those people on the condition that they sign up to a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. Unfortunately, many of those people are so hooked on the drugs and alcohol that if you took that prop away from them, they just can't think of surviving. So they would rather be out on the streets in the freezing cold and the wet in winter and still have their drugs. So the way to get away from that problem is what we're trying to do here in Medway, is to provide accommodation, and it's what they call house first.
Okay.
Once you can get people off the streets into accommodation, still taking their drugs or their alcohol, and then give them a wraparound support so they can deal with those problems.
On that support, where are some places that people might be able to go quickly, just very
If
quickly?
contact Medway Council's housing people, they will give people the letting for that. There is no reason at all why anybody needs to be sleeping on the streets here in Medway. There is support there for them.
That's very
if
good.
they want to take it.
Okay, I'm afraid we are going to have to stop you right there. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be right back after this break. welcome back to Kent Standard. I'm Finn MacDiarmid. Now, as we approach Remembrance Day, services are being held to remember the heroic sacrifices made during the war. A tribute to Colin Blythe, who is argued to be the greatest cricketer to be killed in the First World War, took place on Wednesday at Canterbury Cricket Ground. Our reporter Sammy Cage found out more.
Here at the Spitfire Cricket Ground in Canterbury, members of the local community are taking the time to remember the soldiers that fought in the war, with a special tribute to Colin Blythe, an English cricketer who was killed in action in 1917. Canterbury Cricket Club's chaplain tells us more about the heroic things Blythe did not only for the world of cricket, but for our whole country too.
He was one of the prominent cricketers of the day. Actually, he was quite old for a cricketer when he signed up for the First World War, but he played for England. And was part of the Kent team that won their first championship and also contributed many other championships. So he's known as one of the greatest left-arm spin bowlers of his day and in cricket history, in fact. And so his loss was greatly mourned across Kent. It's always very moving to remember the sacrifice of these young men as they were. There's the epitaph that we read there that talks about them not growing old, and really they're fixed now in our imaginations, in our history as these young men. And so now, as someone who's getting older, it always poignant to think that these people gave their lives.
Regimental Sergeant Major Scott Thomas lays down the wreath to show respect to the ones we've lost. And after 22 years in the army, he explains his thoughts on why it's so important to celebrate this remembrance.
For me, remembrance is really poignant. I have served in Northern Ireland, Iraq, Afghanistan, which is really my generation of wars for the last 20 years. And throughout that time, you lose people that are close to you. So it's really important for remembrance to continue, not just from World War I, World War II, but for this generation of wars going forward. So for me, it's really important to remember the people that I fought with and lost in battle.
Tomorrow marks Remembrance Day, where a 2-minute silence will be held to remember those who have served and sacrificed. And on Sunday, there will be a national service of remembrance that will commemorate the contribution of British and Commonwealth military, civilian servicemen and women involved in the 2 world wars and later conflicts. Sammy Cage, Kent Standard.
Our next story today: November is the month for men's mental health awareness. In Gillingham, a group of residents have honoured this by offering classes where men can gather to speak about their mental well-being. Our reporter Lola Durajaye has the latest on this story.
November is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and in Medway, the Sunlight Centre deliver a range of social interactive activities, one being shed building. Commissioned by Better Medway, Men in Sheds offer sessions to the community 5 days a week, with the majority of their long-standing shedders coming together on Fridays.
There is not a huge amount of provision for men because there's not a lot of understanding about men's mental health, much more than there was before. And we seek to address this by bringing people together. Until very recently, men have been quite wary of discussing their mental health. I mean, these guys, they're older men. They were brought up at a time when it just wasn't acceptable for men to talk about their feelings. But that's something that we encourage here. I think these days, because people are becoming aware that young men and middle-aged men are committing suicide more often than they used to, and certainly a lot more than women, and certainly in Medway, there is more conversation about it.
Earlier this year, the Kent and Medway NHS and Social Care Partnership Trust released a strategy target for 2026, with aims to see 85% of urgent mental health referrals within 24 hours and routine appointments taking place within 4 weeks.
Mental illness is the second largest source of disease throughout England. Over recent years, we've seen a change in demand for these health services, and communities like Men in Sheds allows people across Medway to get the support they need.
It's difficult for blokes to find things to go to connect with, to meet other people. this is like one of the few places in Medway where for free you can go along and do something that's going to be of, you know, some sort of purpose. Maybe it's conditioning, right? In terms of stigma, there's all kinds of like stigmas that people might have adopted internally, right? So I think that some people, depending on their programming and their culture, won't necessarily recognise that they have that, you know, mental health is something that that is a component of their life. There's sort of institutional stigma for mental health as well. You know, like your employer, you know, they're going to sort of respect a bad back more than, you know, I just can't function today because I've been worrying about this and that.
Sessions such as these allow men in and around Kent to learn new skills and connect with other people. In order to ensure that men's mental health is being covered, referrals to communities like these let people express their feelings in another way. Lola Durajaye for Kent Standard.
Now on to sports. For the sports roundup, I have our reporter Shay Rogers joining me here. So Shay, what's going on in the county this weekend in sport?
Well, Finn, there's plenty going on, especially on the football front at the moment. It's an exciting time for Gillingham Football Club, who've just hired their new manager, Stephen Clements. He's managing his first league game this weekend, and my God, is it an exciting one. In the midweek, they played Fulham Football Club, the under-21 side to be exact, and came on the wrong side of a 1-0 scoreline. A few days prior to that, though, they played in the FA Cup first round away to Hereford. They wound up with a clean sheet, and as 2-0 winners going through to the second round now, facing either Cray Valley Paper Mills or Charlton Athletic at home, which is going to be a really exciting occasion for the club and for the team, mainly because they've got the chance to get through to the third round and play some bigger Premier League sides. Looking ahead to this weekend, it's the battle of the American business tycoons, really, in League Two. It's Rob McElhenney's Wrexham side that he commemorates or kind of works with Ryan Reynolds with, and they are going to be having their Netflix crew down there. They're going to be filming plenty, no doubt, and the Gills will be involved with that with Brad Gaulinson and his American investment. It's going to be a struggle though on the goal scoring front. Gills have a few strikers out, and you know they're going to have to find some creativity elsewhere on the pitch.
Very interesting. Now, we've enjoyed more successes in football recently, and it hasn't just been the FA Cup, has it?
Yeah, definitely not. Chatham Town have had an excellent time of recent in the Isthmian Premier. They've started the season off really well. They were as high as second before Tuesday night when they played fellow high flyers Billericay Town. That was a 2-0 loss for them, sadly, but they did hand debuts to Chris Dixon and David Isaiah in a pretty close away game in the end. But looking ahead to this weekend, they've got themselves another really important matchup. They take on 6th place playoff hopefuls Whitehawk at home. And no doubt if they keep flying as they are, they will be up there at the end of the season and hopefully bring in more success to Kent's football in front.
Brilliant. And finally, this year, Diwali, otherwise known as the Festival of Lights, is set to be on the 12th. But it seems celebrations have started early in Kent. The Sahara Foundation, a community group based in Medway, hosted their very own Diwali event for the elderly South Asian community. Our reporter, Mahima Abedin, finds out.
A day filled with bright colours, traditions and laughter. Medway's South Asian community got together and started their Diwali celebrations early. The Sahara Foundation, which focuses on supporting elderly South Asian people, hosted a special event for the Festival of Lights, which is celebrated by Hindus and Sikhs around the world.
So we always have a monthly social event. This is part of that. It's called Galbat, and this is our chance to make it something special, make it super colourful, related to Diwali with the candle making, have the dance. So yeah, that's how, just using that opportunity to make it more bright and special. I think perhaps more can be done to promote cohesion amongst communities. So an event like this, for example, we've got lots of South Asian people here and that's great, but I think it would be even better if we had different communities coming and kind of learning about each other.
This year, Diwali is set to be on the 12th of November, and for many of those celebrating, it marks a new beginning and the triumph of light over darkness. But for those who came to the event, they had a head start. Some of the activities people took part in include glass candle painting and Bollywood dancing.
We were so excited, and we got up early, and we were thinking we are meeting our friends, and then we all day we will have a fun and meeting the new people and talk about our hobbies and things like that. And it's very good for the elderly and retired person, because otherwise we feel alone in the houses.
But while this was an event celebrating Diwali, it was about combating loneliness within the community too. Many of those who came said the support group has greatly benefited their social life.
It's nice that we mix everybody together. I come to every occasion of Saharas. Every occasion with Parmajit organized, we always been here, and I appreciate what she's doing. The number one thing is that because like the winter is drawing in, it makes people get out of the house. Like if this wasn't organized, people will be inside with heavy rain in there. But this is what made people come out.
So today's dress code was traditional clothing, so I've come in my own traditional clothes and I've decided to take part in all the fun, and I'm currently painting my own glass candle holder. But it's safe to say my attempt at painting the glass candle holder was nowhere near as good as some of the others. Mahima Abedin for Kent Standard.
Well, that's all from us here at Kent Standard. Now, if you want to know the latest breaking news, then please visit our website at www.centreforjournalismprojects.co.uk/Kent Standard. That's www.centreforjournalism/Kent Standard. And if there's a story that you'd like us to cover, then please send us a message, our Instagram or on our Twitter, on @Kent Standard. Make sure to follow our social media accounts. You can find us on X at the Kent Standard. Thank you so much for watching. Have a very good evening. Enjoy your Remembrance Weekend, your Diwali, and anything else you might get up to. Thank you for watching and enjoy your weekend.